Okay.
Who changed my chair, by the way?
Oh, they got you. I didn't say anything.
Mr. Weldon, sit down, please. I'd like to call to order first the Board of Works session, piece of this session. If I can get a roll call, Mr. Petty.
Yeah, we got Board Member Tony Abbott.
Here.
Board Member Tommy Roulette.
Present.
City Attorney Dale Weldon.
Here.
President Kelly Malone.
Here.
And myself.
Okay, we had tabled a claim the other night, or part of one of the claims on the whole list of claims, and until we could further investigate, and the investigation was done. And Mr. Weldon, you want to say anything about that?
Yes, please, Your Honor. If it pleases the Board of Works and City Council's in attendance, first I'd like to address the nature of today's meeting. We called the meeting on the record at a work session last night. And this is also a matter that was the vote that occurred at the last regularly scheduled council meeting was to approve all the claims except for this claim. So for the record, that was tabled. So this claim was as a published part of the packet for the regular council meeting. It was also noticed for last night, and then we didn't do it last night, but it was published and noticed, and then we have the meeting today. So even though we have a meeting today that was called less than 24 hours, the open door law does allow that if it's been tabled and moved, and the meeting was announced, and it was announced last night, and it also allows for a meeting to be held less than 24 hours if there's an emergency. This is an invoice from a construction company that their position is that it's valid and should be paid. Of course, you guys will make the final decision on that, but it's better for the city if we address it now rather than risking some kind of action by the contractor. So there's no sense in delaying this decision if it could result in negative action against the city. Of course, the final decision is yours. So that is addressing the reason for the meeting. I appreciate everyone being here. So the next issue, and I'll just kind of go through everything all at once, even though part of this is Board of Works and part of this is City Council. But the issue before us is the issue of a change order that was presented by Probst Excavating based on the project that they did for us at 135 Short Street. 135 Short Street is a property located adjacent to our entertainment park area. It's a piece of property that's been long identified as something that could be important to supplement the parks and the investments we've made there, as well as our small businesses, restaurants, and retail. We were able to procure ownership of that property and start planning for that property to become open air lot, market, restrooms, skating rink, just a really terrific multi-use property. When that property was purchased, in conjunction with that, a budget was presented, proposed, approved, and appropriated for the total project, not just for the demolition, but for the total project. There's a chance that we won't get into the new construction until next year, but it is important to note that that project was budgeted not just for the demo, but for everything. So the total billing is still well underneath what was budgeted and appropriated. We purchased the property, and the first step was demolition, remediation, infill, and preparation for construction. In order to kick that project off, our internal planning and zoning manager developed specifications for the project, and part of those specifications was an estimate of the amount of fill that would be needed. And essentially, the specifications included equipment, both owned and rented, labor, compaction, transportation, infill placement, but it did not include purchasing the fill itself. And our city construction manager, in conjunction with our planning and zoning person who led this project, determined, as is often the case, that it is a benefit to the city and the citizens to purchase materials wholesale with a city purchasing amount. So they were able to do that, and so that's why what you'll see is that the material itself was excluded from the scope, excluded from the bid, excluded from the package. So that bid package with specifications was published with an invitation to bid. That process included pre-qualification, pre-bid meetings, included the bids themselves, the opening of bids, and then the awarding of the bid to the lowest responsive and responsible bidder. It is worth noting that the original estimate that was done internally called for 1,273 cubic tons of fill. That was part of the package. So the package went out, was bid on, lowest responsible bidder was Probst Excavating, and they bid the project at $51,675, and that bid included a breakdown of the parts that I mentioned before as lump sums. The project began, and at some point after the ground was dug out, after the structures were demoed and the ground was dug out, it became clear to both the construction manager Probst as well as city staff that was supervising the project that the bid had been, the estimate for the fill had been grossly low, and in fact about 2/3 low. So the ultimate fill that at the end of the project ended up being 3,487 cubic tons rather than the 1,273 cubic tons that was originally estimated. And it's important to note that because both the city in publishing the bid and Probst in bidding on the project, both were under the understanding that it was for 1,273 cubic tons. Of course, an error was made, but that was the original bid. So when that error was discovered, the determination was made to continue with the project. And so I'm just kind of going through the facts right now. We'll get into the law in a second, but it's important to note that at the time that that decision was made, and I will have Mr. Todd speak in a moment to confirm these facts, but there were two specific determinations made that are important and relevant to our decision-making process. One is that there was an emergency that existed, and the emergency was that when the ground was dug out, it exposed to the north side of that property line the ground beneath the sidewalk, the street, and the railroad tracks. And Mr. Todd uses the term undermining, and he is far more technical than I am, and he'll speak to this. But when that was discovered, it became very clear that we could not stop the project, that it would cause harm, it threatened harm to life, the health, safety, and property of the city of Lawrenceburg. And the second determination, which is important, that I'll also ask Mr. Todd to confirm and speak to, is that he determined, and it was determined, that the cause for the additional cost, which is the change order that we now have before us to consider, was caused by circumstances that were not reasonably foreseen. And not reasonably foreseen is an important definition because that speaks to the contractor more than the city. What I mean by that is when the contractor bid on the project, they had no way of foreseeing that the square tonnage had been underestimated, and neither did we. Now, whoever made the estimation miscalculated the estimation. Mistakes happen. We never shy away from the fact that mistakes happen, but when they do, we know we deal with them in the appropriate way, which is what happened here. So, not reasonably foreseen, an emergency existed. So those are the two key turning points that happened at the moment where the determination was made to continue the project. The project continued. Probst was instructed to continue the project. Another hiccup occurred at that point. The original provider of the fill, Martin Marietta, only had 1,300 cubic tons available. And so Mr. Todd was able, and we were paying, let's see where I have that. We were paying per cubic ton for the 1,300 original cubic tons, and Mr. Todd was able to negotiate the purchase of the additional fill for a much lower price of $11.90 per cubic ton. And you'll see in the memorandum that I drafted, and it's publicly available in our records, a breakdown of this price. So the project was completed. Propes submitted a change order reflecting the additional work and the costs associated with that additional work. And so now what's before us is whether or not to approve that change order. Board of Works, because a change order is an addendum to the original contract that you approved. So Board of Works, when the bid was published and invitations to bid were let and the bid was open and the internal construction manager reviewed that, proposed to us that this is responsive and responsible and it's a low bidder. When you accepted it, you approved a contract. So the only way to add to that contract is through a change order, which is actually an addendum to a contract, like adding to the contract. So that's why Board of Works is first tasked with the decision as to whether or not to amend that contract based on these facts. If Board of Works does approve the change order and agrees to amend the contract, then Common Council will approve the claim again from a previously budgeted, previously appropriated project fund. So I have the final totals for the project. The original Propes bid was $51,675. The additional billing, which is the change order before the Board of Works, is $76,290.45. We purchased $18,914.37 worth of fill from Martin Marietta, and then we purchased $23,760 from Heidelberg in Versailles. And then the only other cost associated with this project was the environmental borings and environmental work of $6,633.53. We actually also had an opinion letter from Strand Engineering, but they did that without charge. If you guys remember, one of the big parts of this project was IDEM approval at the outset. So that's why we had to kind of delay the project because we had to get IDEM approval, railroads involved, so a lot of moving parts here. So when we look at those facts and we try to determine what the appropriate course of action is for a city government, we look to Indiana Code 36-112, which all of those sub categories of that code control public works, publicly bid projects, which is what we had here. So again, when you have a public works project that's publicly bid and we go through the process as we described, and it gets approved by council, then you've approved a contract. Two parties, Propes Excavating, City of Lawrenceburg, meeting of the minds. Hey, here's what you're doing. Here's what we want you to do. Everyone agreed on that. You approved. So the only way to change that is through a change order, which is what is before you today. Change order may be used, issued to add, delete, or change an item or items in the original contract. The change order becomes an addendum to the contract. It must be approved and signed by the board and the contractor. So when can you approve a change order and when can you not? So when we need to understand what our duties are in regard to change orders, we look to 36-1, 12, 18, and for our purposes specifically, we look to sections C and D. So section C, first and foremost, says, in the way I look at the law is, we have facts, we have things that happen on the ground level that we deal with every day. Then we have to look to law, which can be convoluted and complicated. So we're always trying to simplify things and look at things from a common sense perspective. So this subportion of the statute says, well, you can't have a change order before the work starts or before the work is completed, which kind of makes sense, right? But it also says, so it first says a change order may not be issued before commencement of the actual construction, reconstruction, or repairs, except in the case of an emergency. In the case of an emergency requiring payment after commencement and or conclusion of additional work for which change order is based, the Board of Public Works and Safety must make a declaration, and the board's minutes must show the nature of the emergency. So here, what we have is that an emergency existed that did not allow us to stop the project before the commencement of the additional work or the completion of the additional work. But the law says that that is okay, so long as we have a declaration of emergency on the record and that someone with first-hand knowledge, Mr. Todd, speaks to that fact. Next, we have, and so that's subparagraph C, subparagraph D, and I do have some language in here regarding emergency. So 36-112, that statutory structure does not define emergency. We do find a definition of emergency in 36-129-3, which is not directly related. It's actually related to bodies of water and emergencies in that regard, but it is part of the city government statutory structure. And what it says is, and I'm paraphrasing and I'm omitting references to water, but it says a situation that requires immediate action creates a potential for imminent structural damage to property and threatens or creates an imminent risk to the public health, welfare, and safety. And then Webster's dictionary defines emergency as an unforeseen combination of circumstances or the resulting state that calls for immediate action or an urgent need for assistance or relief. So when we look at the facts here, we have someone who has a great deal of construction experience, that personally observed the situation, that has an understanding of the topography and the infrastructure of Lawrenceburg, to the ground, what's below the ground, the potential harm that could have occurred if we stopped the project and something happened in regard to that ground that was exposed. So when you think about an emergency, it is a technical definition, but it's also as to your discretion. The second hurdle that the statute presents us with is located in 36(1)12(18)D, and what that statute says is that the total of all change orders, the aggregate total, cannot exceed 20% for a publicly bid public work projects. Again, common sense, that makes sense, that tracks, because what the legislature is saying is, okay, we don't want situations where people are purposely underbidding projects or putting fluff into projects, and we understand that things happen that are unforeseen and do need to result in change orders. But if you get above 20%, now you're really doing a whole new project, right? So there's a prohibition against aggregate change orders totaling more than 20%. However, it does state in 36(1)12(18)D that a change order issued as a result of circumstances that could not have been reasonably foreseen does not increase the scope of the project, and therefore the 20% cap does not apply. So not only does the statute say the 20% cap does not apply in situations where the increase was caused by circumstances that could not have been reasonably foreseen, it also says, it goes one step further and says that doesn't even increase the scope. So not only does the 20% cap not apply, it's not even counting towards the 20% cap. So you could have hypothetically a change order that was above 20% for not reasonably foreseen circumstances and still have additional change orders because you're starting from zero. That doesn't apply. And then the final analysis that I thought was appropriate was in analyzing the appropriateness of the new billing compared to the old billing. The old billing was based on lump sum figures that were broken out to the certain parts of the project that PROPS would provide. The new billing is similarly broken out, but it is hourly, and we did have to add a saw cut of the sidewalk because of what was uncovered beneath the railroad tracks in the street. And so analyzing the original bid amount of $51,675 with the additional work that was done valued at $76,290.45 and comparing that with the original bid estimate of 1,273 cubic tons versus what ended up actually being 3,487 cubic tons. That is substantially that is a substantially similar increase related to the amount of money for the additional work as compared to the amount of an additional tonnage. So basically we're 2/3 low on the tonnage and we're 2/3 low on the price. So that's another thing that I believe to be significant. Based on Indiana law, which clearly speaks to the issues before us, based on the opinions of Mr. Todd, which again I'll ask him to speak to as soon as I'm done here. I believe that this project does satisfy both section 36(1)12(18)C in that an emergency existed, which allows the payment of a change order after the commencement and conclusion of the work. And I believe that it does also satisfy 36(1)12(18)D, which says that if the change order is a result of circumstances that could not have been reasonably foreseen, again, at the outset, and it's for PROPS as well as us, then the 20% cap does not apply, and in fact, it does not increase the scope of the project. Based on those factors, I would advise the Board of Public Works and Safety and the Common Council to approve the change order, amend the contract to reflect the same, and pay the claim. And if it pleases the board and your honor, then I would have Mr. Todd speak. And specifically, Mr. Todd, did you determine that an emergency existed when it became clear that the ground was exposed and we were going to have to put in more cubic tons than originally scoped, and the decision was made to continue the work? And could you just kind of speak to the reasons for that?
Correct. Well, thank you. I hope I'm as elegant as you were just now. Maybe a little shorter. But after a demo, we did find that we had undermining, which a void or cavity underneath the sidewalk. Due to the heavy train traffic that runs through that area, that void actually gave way to some pea-gravel fill that's underneath the street. With that migration, we felt the street was going to be in danger, which would continue on, of course, to the railroad. We call it the tie bed itself, the railroad. So in saying that, we kept fill going onto the site.
Thank you, Mr. Todd. And then second, to the issue of the unforeseeable circumstances related to the bid. When the bid was published, invitations were made, pre-bid meetings were held, the bid was opened, bids were analyzed and awarded, recommended to the board for approval. At any time, did you, and what I mean by you is your team, which includes construction manager department and planning and zoning department, or Probst Excavating or the other bidders, have any way to foresee that estimate was inaccurate?
No, we didn't. I personally didn't check that quantity. In hindsight, I guess we would, but again, we did not check the quantity.
In that estimate was made internally by the planning and zoning manager, and that estimate was the one that was used to scope the project, bid the project, and when the bid was awarded, it was understood by the city and Probst that was the amount of cubic tons. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yes, sir. Mr. Todd, thank you. Thank you. That's all I have for this matter.
Could I add one other thing to
Yes,
that?
of course.
Of course, our first source of material was the Martin Marietta. They did run out of fill, that type material, and made it clear to us they would not produce anymore. So at that time, we looked for a secondary site that we needed that material that was recommended by engineering, which was the Versailles location.
At a cheaper rate. as
Correct,
well.
correct.
Yep.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, I just want to make one comment, or two short comments. I just want to make sure, and I think it was just covered, but all of the bidders on this particular project, but I want to make sure that all the contractors that do business with the city of Lawrenceburg know that, on this particular project, everybody bid on the same set of specs.
Right.
Nobody anticipated the increase. The second piece is, I want to thank Board of Works and Council for not just rubber stamping something before it was researched. It would have been very easy to just go ahead and approve that claim. But I think by doing this research, making sure we did it the right way, making sure that Council had an opportunity to research, emergency situations, because it will come up again.
Yep.
I'm not saying that over 20% may come up, but you never know, right? And so I'm glad we were able to do this, and really everybody should be glad that you guys didn't just rubber stamp and approve the claims. I think that's worth noting. So with that said, I'd like to entertain a motion from Board of Works to approve the change order and amend the contract with Probst Excavating.
And Your Honor, if it pleases,
Yes.
if it pleases Your Honor and the board, just the way the statute's written, if we could have a vote to declare that an emergency existed first.
Okay.
And approve it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Through the Board of Works.
Yes, sir.
Okay, the first motion I want to entertain is if we can get a motion to agree that there was an emergency in this situation during the excavation.
I'll make that motion.
Second,
I'll second it, Mayor.
all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next motion for the Board of Works I'd like to make is a motion to approve the change order from Propes Excavating and amend the original contract with that change order.
And basically, we're stating here that we're going to go ahead and pay,
That'll be done with council.
okay,
This is moving it to council.
okay, okay.
That it-
Well, Mayor, with finding of the facts that we went through, I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Now I would like to address council. You've just heard that the change order was approved by,
Are we going to close this meeting and then open the council?
we didn't post it with two different meetings. That'll be one
I
meeting.
didn't even introduce Lenny and Brett before. They
We can-
didn't
we can-
they didn't even get their names mentioned.
We can close it?
Yeah, we can close it and do a roll call for council.
Okay. All right, well, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn Board of Works.
I'll make that motion, Mayor.
Second.
I'll second.
Lenny didn't get to make that.
I just,
All in
I felt
favor?
like, I can't leave Lenny's, their names out.
I hear you.
No problem.
All right, I'd like to call to order Board of Works session for July 25th, or not Board of Works, Council, for July 25th. This meeting is starting at 9:29, but can I get a roll call, Mr. Fett?
All right, we got councilperson Tony Abbott.
Here.
Councilperson Tommy Roulette.
Present.
Councilperson Lenny Fryman.
Here.
We got councilperson Brett Bondurant.
Yes, sir.
We got councilperson Justin Noppert absent, and we got city attorney Dale Weldon,
Here.
Mayor Kelly Malone,
Yes, sir.
and myself.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fetty. Council, you've just heard from Board of Works the approval of the change order from Propes Excavating to amend the contract due to an emergency. What I'm asking council is a motion to approve the claim.
2731.
27, and the claim number was 2731. Can I get a motion or any more discussion?
I'll make a motion.
Second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, guys. Anybody got anything else before we close this meeting?
I got grass that needs mowed. Anybody want to help?
No, thank you. Get it done before Thursday or Friday. It's going to be hotter. All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks for
Or everybody.
Thanks for your help.